All right, so for our Monday math, we're going to start for Bible. Did I say math? Sorry. For Monday Bible, Acts 19, verse 17 is where we'll start. We're going to talk about two different things in Acts 19, and that is the burning of scrolls and a riot. Okay, so Paul is in Ephesus. Apollos had gone over there to Corinth, and he's been hanging out here. He's been talking, and a bunch of people are really wowed by the message. And when this one guy beat up the 7 other guys, people really took notice, and they are all about turning to Jesus, a real come to Jesus moment, literally and figuratively, in Ephesus. And Ephesus was the center of a lot of things. It was where one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world was, the temple to Artemis. Artemis is a female goddess of several things. I don't know how to put it more delicately. She was a goddess that had about, 30 to 50 breasts. It looks like a big, huge hunk of grapes around her. They would make statues of her. They would make statues of the little trinkets of her, of the shrine itself. I guess this temple was the temple of all temples. It was bigger, it was more glorious than any other temple in the ancient world, and I guess it was amazing. The only thing left is maybe a little bit where the foundation was and one little pillar sticking up in the middle. It's still there in Ephesus, not quite in the downtown, but outside. Now, the legend was that she came from the sky. And the best that we can figure out is that there was probably a meteorite that hit the earth, a big space rock of some sort, probably very dense. And they actually think that maybe they crafted the statue of Artemis in her temple partly out of that stone. Many of the old depictions of her has a darkened face, and they think that maybe it was from this darkened stone that came from up above. And there's also a reference in the Bible, did she not come from above? So they're very into the skies. They're very into their goddess Artemis and how great she is. And they're also into the fortune telling, all that mysticism, that kind of thing. Well, in Acts 19, verse 17, a bunch of people have this come to Jesus moment, and people that were into these astrological scrolls where you would tell people's fortune. We still have that today. It's called a horoscope. If you actually got a newspaper, there's horoscopes in newspapers. There's probably websites that say, today you will find a small fortune. Well, if you're walking on a sidewalk and see a penny, you'd say, oh yeah, my horoscope was correct. They're very general, but people make a lot of money on them. And what they decided to do is they came to Paul and like, we want to put this aside, Paul. We want to put that old life of ours, of fortune telling, behind us. And they offered to burn their scrolls, their little tell the future scrolls. And the value of the scrolls totaled 50,000 drachmas. Well, 50,000 drachmas is significant because Luke records that in here. And why is it so significant? Well, a drachma is about a day's wage. Let's say you make $100 a day. And, for some people that might be the case. For some people that might be low. Some people might be kind of high. Well, let's just say $100 a day at a job. Times 50,000, that's $5 million worth. Now, Ephesus was a pretty affluent place. Maybe their day's wage was higher than that. If it was $200 a day, it'd be 10 million. But this was not a small sum that these people were giving up. They're giving up their whole livelihood. I mean, could you imagine your folks coming home and saying, you know what, we're giving up the shop, we're giving up this because we're following this religion? That would be a big deal. It's quite the sacrifice. It says, after this happened, Paul decided to go to Jerusalem, passing through Macedonia and Achaia, which is Greece. After I'd been there, he said, I must also visit Rome. He sent 2 of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia while he stayed in the province of Asia. So what he's talking about is he's saying, I want to go over there, but he's not going there yet. So he sent Timothy and Erastus ahead. And Erastus was the name of the guy that we find etchings of in Corinth. But he sends them out and he stays in Ephesus. And there's a riot that breaks out before he goes. Now, Demetrius is a guy whose name is probably sort of maybe the Chamber of Commerce leader, a guy that stands up for the businesses in Ephesus. And he's saying, this way, these Christian folks, they're messing up our business. We have a huge business here where we're selling trinkets. People come from hundreds of miles away, walking and whatever, just to see the temple to Artemis. And then when they go home, they want to buy either a figurine of Artemis or a figurine of the temple. And the more you pay, I guess the more fortune it gives you. So you don't want to go cheap. I mean, you walk 500 miles, you have to walk 500 back. So you might as well buy a marble version of the whole Artemis temple, and then also maybe a figurine of her, and don't get the little one, get a bigger one. And anyway, they were making just boatloads of cash off of these pilgrims that would come there. And Paul's saying, we believe in a one true God, a God that doesn't need human hands to build them temples or to do things for them. Just one God, and that God lives in here. The temple's in here. You don't need to buy these trinkets. Well, they start getting ticked, and he calls a bunch of these business leaders together and said, men, we receive a good income from this business. And you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. He says that man-made gods are no gods at all. So he's saying, hey, they're sacrificing, he's going to sacrifice our business here, guys. And anyway, then he goes on to say, there is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the whole world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. And when they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And then soon the whole city was in an uproar. And then these guys, Paul was so proficient in spreading the gospel that he had friends in high places, and he was going to go in and he was going to talk to all these people in the great amphitheater there in Ephesus. And even the leaders like, no, Paul, stay at home. We don't want you to get torn apart here. And so then the whole assembly is there, and they're all screaming and yelling. And some of the officials in the province, told Paul to stay at home. But then there were these Jews who wanted to kind of tell everybody, hey, we're not like these Christians that are starting this problem. So they send this Alexander, a Jew, up to say, hey, everybody, just want to let you know, we're Jews, we believe in the one true God. And they're like, oh, get out of here. And they kind of just sort of lumped the Jews and the Christians in together. And they pushed him off the stage. And then they yelled for 2 hours. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Could you imagine that? And the amphitheater that's still there today is huge and glorious and wonderful. And you could imagine it just belting out of there. It would be like going to a Seahawks game where they said, great is Russell Wilson for 2 hours straight. Okay? And then there's a dude that really bucks up here, the city clerk, probably one of the most powerful guys in Ephesus. And he's really concerned here because, you can talk about different gods and things like that, but one thing you don't do in the Roman world is, disturb the peace. And if your town is disturbing the peace, like the whole town, Rome might send a legion of the army there and really take care of business, and it could be really, really bad. So this guy stands up and he's real chill about it all, and he kind of lays down the law and say, hey, everybody, you know what? It's undeniable. Our goddess is great. He says, men of Ephesus, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image which fell from heaven? That's why we think that maybe it's a meteorite. Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, it's not a big deal. Everybody calm down. you know, if this gets back to Rome, it's going to be trouble. If you guys have some sort of legal problem, you want to file something with our judicial system, we got judges, we got courts. We'll go that route. So this guy really calms everybody down. He's a stud, okay? And it really goes to show, like I said earlier, how Rome, the Greco-Roman world, is much like our world today. It's very, very close. I mean, our world's law and order is built on theirs. So nowadays, it'd be the same thing. If people were in an uproar downtown Linden over some religious thing, there'd be a policeman, people come in and say, you guys, we can handle this in the courts. If you got a problem, file it, and we're fine. Okay, so then after all that commotion was taken care of, in the next chapter, Paul continues on and goes into the rest of the Roman world again. All right? Pretty cool stuff.